Before we start, I'd just like to just say these few things. So, of course, please can I remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and the copy archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If you wish to speak, put your hand up or use the chat function or put your hand up on the screen. And if you've got any difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or let one of the democratic officers know. If they have webcam, they should try to turn this off, as this will help the broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so at least they can be heard and they can hear. So without further ado, thank you everyone, and on to the first agenda item, which is always apologies for absence.
None received, Chairman.
Okay, I'm just looking at my screen. Is Leighton on?
I can't see that he's come online as yet. I don't know whether, Gareth, would you be able to try calling Councillor Rowlands?
Yeah, I'll try call him now, thanks. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I believe he should be here. Spoke to him earlier, so. Hi there, Councillor Neil Thomas.
Oh, just switching off online. Yeah, just wondering if you heard from Rhiannon Birch.
I've not heard from Councillor Birch either.
I'll give him a quick call now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And on to agenda item 2, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October 2020. Councillor Hunter-Jarvie?
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Good. Just on the minutes, I'm happy to move them, but in declarations of interest, you've got my name. It's done there wrongly. It's T.H. Jarvie, not T.J. Jarvie. If that could be corrected, please.
Apologies for that. We can certainly do that. Thank you very much.
Easily done, don't worry.
No problem. Are we happy to move the minutes?
Right.
Propose. Okay, and a seconder. It's got plenty of thumbs up. Okay, Andrew Parker. And then on to number 3 to declare declarations of interest. Do we have anyone here? Can't see anyone's hand up. I can't see anything in the chat. So we are good there. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're on to the main agenda, which is on to references. Agenda item 4, sport and play update, healthy living and social care, Scrutiny Committee, 11th February 2020. David Knevett, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to come along this evening. It's most welcome. This referral actually dates back to February and obviously before the pandemic, and was the last meeting of the Scrutiny Committee for Healthy Living and Social Care. The reason that it was referred to Education Committee is in the attachment on page 5 and on page 6. Of particular relevance is recommendation 3, and probably more so than that is reasons for recommendation 3, which was the decrease in female participation rates as part of the Women and Girls on the Move programme, and also feedback received from primary school. And I'd just like to correct this slightly in terms of a lack of confidence. I think the correct word should have been an increase in confidence rather than a lack of confidence in terms of delivering physical education curricula, and I will speak on that in a moment. As regards female participation levels, I do need to point out to committee that this is based upon statistics that we gathered approximately 2 years ago and formed part of the project report for sports development in 2018/19. Women and girls remains a very important target group for us, and in our partnership with the money provided by Sport Wales for us to deliver a comprehensive sports development programme in the Vale of Glamorgan, it's something that we've concentrated a lot of resources on, and hopefully we will see the statistics improve in recent years. I think it was just to make the committee aware of the fact that there was concern about this particular area, which probably in turn leads to why it is such an important target group for ourselves. In terms of the PE, we've delivered some assistance in schools, and I'm very keen to stress that sports development isn't meant to replace physical activity teaching in school, which is a very specific activity in its own right. We're very much about extracurricular and about enhancing, but where opportunities do exist to assist, obviously we're more than happy to take those on board, and we have been able to provide some funding as detailed in the report that members will have seen attached to the agenda today. And we've been delighted that 7 schools have actually taken that training and decided that they want to deliver it themselves to all of their teachers because they found it particularly worthwhile. We are in the process of identifying more funding at the current time for that to continue further. And again, partnerships with school, getting young children sort of infused about sport and physical activity at a very young age is obviously particularly important. And something that we're particularly proud that we're making a big difference in the Vale of Glamorgan. We've consistently been a top 3 performer in terms of activity level. So although we're again concentrating a little bit on the negative this evening, I think there's an awful lot of positives in terms of what our sports development team have delivered over a number of years. Chair, I'm quite happy to lead it there unless you want any more specific information or if there are any questions.
Thank you, David. I'm okay with, are there any questions here from the group? Hi, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm with one of my other hats. I'm on the Healthy Living Committee as well. I remember this coming to us nearly a year ago, and as Dave says, there were considerable concerns about the drop in female participation, particularly in Pencoitra, which had gone from being a single-sex to a mixed-sex school. And there were concerns expressed at that time or at that meeting about this, sort of looking at possible reasons why girls who had been more active, there was now a 50% drop in participation at that school, and why that should have come about. I mean, you've got girls who are previously enthusiastic about becoming involved in sport and doing these sporting activities, suddenly not. And we thought that at Healthy Living that this needed to be highlighted to learning. The other element of concern, which Dave didn't mention, was the number of primary teachers who, and again, I'm quoting from the report, said they did not feel confident in delivering PE lessons at primary level. And we felt that this was an area of concern which really needed to be addressed, because if the teachers aren't confident of doing it, then perhaps the younger children aren't getting the kind of PE experiences that they should be getting across the board. And we felt that this, again, needed to be addressed and discussed. One of the ideas I think that was mentioned at the time was that schools perhaps needed PE champions to work with the teachers and the PE curriculum within the schools to improve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. David?
Yeah, if I could respond on both of those points, and thank you, Councillor Thomas, for making those. I'm not sure in terms of primary school teachers whether it was a lack of confidence. What I think the report specifically highlighted was an increase in confidence with additional training. And I think that's something that we're working hard at actually delivering and working with schools. And when I spoke about the sort of 7 schools that wanted to invest in terms of their teachers and their continuing professional development, that's something we're keen to support other schools with, and we have secured further funding to actually do as such. In terms of the women and girls, and particularly the issue that we had noticed with the move to the move away from single-sex schools as such, that is something that we are continuing to monitor, and we did say we would be putting efforts in and obviously carrying out research with women and girls to find out what were the barriers in terms of their participation levels, so that hopefully we can correct that, whether they wanted to be part of joint classes or whether they wanted individual or whatever, and work is ongoing on that. And I would hope that we would bring that back to both scrutiny committees in due course when we consider future sports development reports.
Okay, thank you, David. Catherine McCaffer, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to take this opportunity in this particular forum to give credit to Karen and her team. They work really, really hard. They're an amazingly cohesive team. They've got the children's best interests at heart at every available opportunity. So I just wanted to kind of just say today that really their team is amazing, and it's one of those, and play is one of those things that people don't think about a lot, but it's so desperately important for all of our children. So thank you for all the hard work that you do, and I'm glad that the community appreciates what you do.
Excellent, thank you, Catherine. Would anyone else like to comment? David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to echo Councillor McCaffer's views, really. We had the pleasure of working on a joint project over the summer with Karen and her team to develop play opportunities for vulnerable children over the summer in light of the pandemic, and it proved to be a very, very successful collaboration, and a lot of young people, young people were supported really, really professionally as a consequence. So, an opportunity to say thank you to David and his team there, and just also to say that obviously if there is an impact of co-ed on female participation in sport, that is something that we will also look into and work with David's team in relation to that, and we can raise it with the school and through the improvement partners as well, I'm sure, to try and have an impact, a positive impact there.
Okay, thank you, David. Do we have any comments or questions? If not, so the recommendations for this agenda item is to note the annual report, and that a further annual report of activities will be submitted to the committee. Are we happy for that to be moved?
Sorry, Chair, I think that's reference to health, living and social care.
Oh, sorry.
I think if there's no comments, then I think we just note the reference if there's nothing else to come from committee.
Okay, I think we're just happy to note it. Okay, we got that. Okay, great. We shall now move on to agenda item 5, which is the update on the community benefits and sustainability outcomes of Band B of the 21st Century Schools programme. So this is a reference from Cabinet, 19th of October, and Matthew, I believe you're taking this on for us.
That's right, thanks, Chair. Oh, great. I've just had the invite to show my screen. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yep. Excellent.
Okay, so the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the delivery of community benefits as part of the Bambi of the 21st Century Schools programme. So as you all know, the 21st Century Schools programme is an ambitious programme where we'll see £167 million invested in our school buildings across the Vale over the 5-year life of the programme. So when we go to appoint a contractor and we start the procurement process, as part of that process, we evaluate the bids on the contractor's approach to community benefits. And the reason we do that is to maximise value for money, to ensure that our schemes aren't just new build schemes, but also have a positive impact on the local community throughout the construction process. So we ask them to fill in questions about how they're going to approach the delivery of community benefits, but we also ask them to set specific targets. Now those targets cover areas that are below there, just things like supporting small local businesses, training and upskilling the new workforce entrants, STEM engagements within the school that's party to the build, but also local schools around that as well, and also supporting wider community groups with in-kind support and training. So it's a really important part of the development of our schemes, and something that we really promote and push to maximise the positive outcomes that we can get through the construction. We also, when we do appoint a contractor, we also put those targets as contractual obligations within the contracts that we sign with the contractor, so we can monitor them and make sure that they are delivered throughout the life of the programme. So we have two major work programmes that have been appointed to date to contractors. So the first of those is the Barry Secondary Learning Communities programme of work, which is a more than £86 million investment programme in secondary education in Barry. So we have 3 separate schemes and 3 separate contractors within this programme. Pencoitra High School is a new build, a £35 million new build, which has been appointed to Bouygues, UK. Whitmore High School is a £30 million new build that's been appointed to Morgan Sindall, and we also have a £24 million expansion and refurbishment for Ysgol Bro-Morgannwg, and that one's been appointed to ISG. We've now got another programme that's been appointed as well, which is the Western Vale Primaries. Now that one is a £14 million programme of work, which is to deliver 3 brand new 210 place primary school buildings across the Western Vale. This one was tendered as a single contract, which was appointed to ISG Construction last year. So due to the scale of the projects that we have, with more to come in Bambi as well, and to maximise the benefits that we could get for the local community, we've adopted an innovative collaborative approach, which is not usually found in construction projects. So the reason for that is to ensure a consistent set of results across all of our projects, so that the whole of the Vale can benefit. So that is led by the steering group, which is I believe pictured there, and that includes representatives from the 3 contractors, also ACOM, who provide multidisciplinary consultancy services across the Bambi schemes, and also has representatives from the Vale and third sector on there. So just to give an idea of what's been achieved to date, between January 19 and September 20, there's been real progress in the delivery of community benefits, and although it's still at quite an early stage in the development of the programme, we've seen some real positive results, and particularly in spite of the coronavirus pandemic as well over that time. So we've seen more than 5,000 person weeks of training and new entrant jobs. We've seen 3,000 person weeks of new entrant training, 400 hours of STEM engagements within schools across the Vale, 4 supply chain events to deliver that supply chain within the Vale as much as we can. We've had 80% of the construction spend so far in Wales. 76% of our subcontractors are based in Wales, and 50% of the workforce comes from the local CF postcode as well. So some really good results that will really positively impact on the local economy. So with work experience and training, our contractors work closely with Job Centre Plus, Apprentice and Communities for Work to promote construction to people within the local community. The Careers Changes programme has also been really successful at promoting construction jobs to get women back into construction or to start a career in construction. We actually had one example where somebody started work experience through the programme at one of our sites, who then got full-time permanent employment on one of our other sites. So that was a really positive outcome, and we're seeing more of that. The contractors also work closely with the schools, so they do assemblies to promote construction and STEM subjects. to try and get people to take careers in the construction industry, and to show it's more than just building. You know, there's a lot of elements to construction. They also have been doing site visits with the pupils, so they can see the building and they can have a look at what's going on behind the scenes, particularly looking at the primary schools around the secondary schools as well, so they can see what building they will be having when they move up in the future. We've got the ambassadors program, so that we have ambassadors within the schools, so they can talk about what's going on to their friends and their peers. And this is one of the areas of the biggest change because of the coronavirus. So when schools closed back in March, the work continued, albeit in a different way. So the contractors developed activity packs and construction games and tasks that could be done in the school hubs, and we delivered those out so that they could continue to be to learn and be part of construction throughout the coronavirus pandemic. ISG Construction helped us create an app that was available for school staff and parents and pupils to have a look at what the school will look like with social distancing measures implemented. And it also gave the head teachers and staff practical tips on how to implement social distancing. The ISG also helped us develop care packages, which are pictured, that had stencils, spray paint, signage for the schools and tape that they could put on the ground, and they helped us deliver those. And then they've continued, since the schools have opened, to continue to engage, but in a different way. So instead of bringing pupils on site, now we do online videos, tours of the buildings and the construction, so they can see how it's changing over time. And we're also doing virtual work experience. With environmental and wellbeing enhancement, all of our schemes are designed to be BREEAM excellent. So that means that that they are sustainable and efficient buildings that use renewables wherever possible. And we also look at enhancing ecology and wildlife through ponds and wildlife areas and forest schools provision. 90% of our waste from our construction sites is diverted from landfill and recycled. And we're also setting up a green wall competition. So the site hoardings around the construction that aren't always the prettiest to see, we're looking at building a green wall on those so that the school can be part of that and develop them and have a bit of competition across all of the different sites. We've also done a lot of work with ISG Construction over the past 12 months to deliver a low carbon school design, and we've also taken that step further to develop a net zero carbon school design as well. So the new primary school that we're building in Roos will be the first net zero carbon primary school in Wales, which is really positive and really links in with the climate emergency and delivering net zero by 2030. There have been numerous engagements with the supply chain, forming events which were jointly held with all of the contractors who were on site. They've also done a lot of work with upskilling subcontractors from the local area to help them bid for work and to help them get business in the future. And as I said before, with some of the stats, a lot of the spend is within the local area and within Wales, which is what we want it to be. One of the real positive stories with it is that Ysgolhaig are providing the on-site catering facilities. They've set up Box Boyd, which is providing meals and catering services for the contractors across the 3 schemes in Barry. So that's really good, valuable work experience for those children before they go into employment later on. Community projects is also a big part of the development of community benefits. So we have an application process where community groups throughout the Vale can submit requests for donations and in-kind voluntary support from the contractors. That was launched, I believe, last year in 2019 with a large litter pick that was over in Barry Island. And since then, a number of community projects have come on board and have been approved by the steering group. I think there's a community garden project in Colquitt that's starting next year. There's also a community garden project in Palmerston that's happening over the next couple of months. The contractors have also been delivering hampers to local food banks over the last 12 months as well, and delivering Christmas trees to the schools in the local area. So I hope that gives a bit of an idea of what goes on, and just to show that these construction projects aren't just building projects, they're also about having a real positive impact through construction on the local economy, on pupils, teaching and learning and their well-being, and also have a real positive impact on the local environment in terms of promoting sustainability as well. So I think that covers it all.
Thank you very much, Matthew. That was great. We have one or two people who would like to speak, and firstly, Councillor Neil Thomas, I believe you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Matthew. That was an excellent presentation, and I'm very pleased to hear the community involvement and everything involved. I have a question though in terms of current unpleasantnesses, really. Where we're on point 2.36 in the report, where we're talking about decarbonisation and looking towards zero carbon schools and all the rest of it. Given the current COVID mitigation needs, all public buildings need to be well ventilated, and to try to reduce the distancing requirements. You know, if you've got better air circulation, the distancing requirements are lower in the enclosed spaces. This will clearly impact on the energy consumption due to heat loss through open windows and so forth. And I'm wondering what sort of whether this is being studied, what the studies involve, and any other mitigation that might be needed, or any other changes in design perhaps that might be highlighted by the COVID necessities. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much for the question, Councillor Thomas. It is a difficult one, and something that we've talked about quite a lot over the last couple of months. Unfortunately, there is no a better alternative than opening windows and doors to get that circulation through buildings, and that does have an impact on sustainability and on energy usage, particularly going into the winter. We've had chats with Welsh Government about this. They're aware that it is an issue, but it is still the best advice. But on the point, the best thing that we can do is have a long-term view of our buildings to try and get them as sustainable and to net zero as possible, in the understanding that this hopefully is a temporary measure that will be that will only last the next however long it will last. So we do account for net zero. We try to maximise. It's a bit of a finger in the air, but no, the main thing we try to achieve through net zero schools is ensuring that as much as our energy usage comes from renewables through solar again. What we haven't done previously on builds is provide battery storage for PV panels. Which is something that we are now doing with net zero schools, so that where you can store that energy from the panels and you can use it when needed, and it's stored on site in those batteries. So that's something that will help. Yes, they'll be using higher energy, but if it can come from renewables, fantastic. The other good thing that we found from the good thing about our buildings in terms of feedback through coronavirus is we spent a lot of time in June, July going out to visit schools to give them some practical tips and advice on how they can implement social distancing and how they can maintain contact groups. That was a lot easier in our new build schools that were delivered over the last 10 years. So that shows us that we are on the right track in terms of direct access to outside whenever possible, wide corridors wherever we can, and individual cubicle toilets, and those have all been hugely beneficial through coronavirus to support those practices.
Thank you both. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the performance on this, I mean, Jane's smiling because she knows what I think about this. It's absolutely phenomenal to deliver this level of community benefits on a scheme of this scale. If we're talking about 80% of construction spend within Wales on a £167 million programme, that is phenomenal. And it's why, in effect, my portfolio is education and regeneration. This has got to be one of the biggest regeneration schemes that we've done ever in the council. But they don't rest on their laurel. In Band A of the 21st Century Schools programme, if I'm not mistaken, the last total I saw was that we were trebling Welsh Government targets. I think we probably went even further than that. And I will be very, very interested to see where we get to on this one, because not only the contractors and the 21st Century Schools team, but all the other bodies that are actually involved with this. You saw them in the meetings that we have. Everybody is looking to build on everybody else's activity. So we've got recently we had funding to do a foundation economy pilot to look at how we can break down barriers to small local businesses getting involved in our procurement and in our construction spend, etc. And last week there was a Meet the Buyer event which was specifically linked to Pencoitra High School, and it'll be interesting to know what came out of that. As was mentioned, they did continue operating through the pandemic in a very socially distanced way. We went up to visit Whitmore High School, and the way in which we were marshalled and corralled and whatever all around the school was absolutely brilliant. But I think what I need to say as well is that the Communities for Work team have also been involved in making sure that people who need work experience or job placements or even jobs have those opportunities. Our housing team is also involved as well, making sure that they're making the links, as in a huge range of agencies. So a huge thank you and huge congratulations to the team, and would look forward to their next update.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Would anyone else like to ask any questions or comments? Councillor Sandra Perks.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the School of Hard Knocks. I've had sort of experience through work that I've done, sort of referring people to the School of Hard Knocks, and I wondered if that is now whether they've run a course within the Vale, and what the results were from that, because I know that can be very it's very sort of proactive and helping to turn people's around to, you know, sort of get on the road to work. And I just wondered if we'd actually ran a course in the Vale, or when the plans are to actually run one. Thank you.
I can pick up on that, Matt, if you like. So yes, we have run a course in the Vale just before the pandemic, so we were lucky in that, and we have 2 individuals that have come off that programme that are working on our current school project. So yes, it really does work. We're still in touch with the School of Hard Knocks. They've given other training, so they've done mental health training as well to the site teams and obviously to the guys out on site. And they've also given testicle cancer awareness training. So they cover a broad range. So they're a great organisation for us to be linked in with. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, we're looking to be all happy here. So are there any recommendations? If not, then we will note this report. Is that okay for everyone? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, team. Thank you, Jane, for all your help and work on that. Now we can move on to agenda item 6, which is a report from the Director of Learning and Skills. The first is the service update. Martin, I believe, hi there, I believe you're taking this.
I am, yeah. I don't know if I'm going to have an invitation to share screen or whether colleagues chair have the report to hand.
I can give you screen sharing rights. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, thanks.
Has that come up on your screen now?
It has, thanks.
Lovely.
Okay. I don't know if colleagues can see this or not.
I can see it.
Can you see the Learning and Culture Committee report? Yeah.
Yes, we can. I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk through. So, the purpose of the report initially, Chair, was to update on the attainment and progression of the youth service up until March of this year. We were due to deliver the report, but obviously the pandemic hit, and so the report has been delayed until this point. What we've tried to do is summarise the progression of the youth service over the aforementioned period, but also talk through some of the amendments that we've made in light of the pandemic, because naturally, as has been the case with a number of teams and services across the local authority, we've had to make some quite significant amendments to ensure that our service can still be delivered to the young people. Okay, so scrolling down, we're feeling that the youth service is still continuing to perform well. We have a slight reduction in the overall numbers attending the service in light of our reshape and restructure, but we've continued to deliver to a high level in terms of accredited outcomes. We've had to switch things up quite significantly in light of the pandemic to use social media in a more kind of aggressive manner to target young people and to get the service publicised in the appropriate manner. And you can see there's some of the mediums we've used to try and link in with young people, because as we engage with them, they're quite clear with us that they're comfortable using platforms such as Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, etc. So we're looking to engage increasingly in light of the pandemic and as a consequence of the needs of the young people via those avenues. We've got a strong relationship set up with the youth, although there has been some disruption to service as a consequence of the pandemic. So we're looking to try and relaunch some of the work with the youth and associated partners in light of it. And we are using some of our systems there, the one system is to ensure we've got a good level of communication and tracking of our young people in terms of our partnerships. A big success that continues to perform really well in terms of the youth services are targeting alongside the NEAT agenda, the Not in Employment, Education and Training agenda. And we've got two projects there, Inspired to Achieve and Inspired to Work, I2A and I2W. Our progress along I2W lines is particularly impressive. We are the highest attaining partner within our regional network, and to be honest, Chair, if it wasn't for our high attainment in terms of I2W and our exceptional performance, our region would be really struggling in our southeast region. So that's a particular good news story to highlight. I2A is achieving really well in terms of our pre-16 too, and we're looking now to sustain that performance for the remaining 2 years of the project, because as you can see, it is European Social Fund backed, and that funding will cease in December 22. We also have the Youth Engagement Project, which is absolutely essential to the delivery of our pupil referral unit curriculum. We engage with some of the most challenged young people in the community. There's 60 per week. We look to engage them via suite BTEC qualifications and also GCSE level qualifications. It's been key that the YEP staff and the YEP service delivery has been key in terms of the pandemic, and they've ensured that young people who are on roll with the PRU and accessing YOTUS type provision have had that crucial well-being engagement and nurture that's essential really, and that has proven to be essential during the period of lockdown. There's some information there around the Welsh Government. We continue to access grant funding, which is absolutely essential to us in terms of service delivery. £254,000 worth of grant funding there, and that's meant that we can employ an additional 5 staff to continue to extend our provision alongside the services that are already in place. A bit of information there about our grant funding, core funding, 45% to 56%, and obviously there has to be recognition there with grant funding. It is obviously vulnerable to being reduced, so we have to be incredibly creative sometimes around sustainability of projects in the longer term. Scrolling down, then the key recommendations that the members look at the progress that's been made over the last 12 months, and that we would look then to come back and update further in September 21. We have our key responsibilities around the NEETs agenda, as I mentioned earlier, to try and ensure that minimal numbers of young people find themselves in that category. That's done via YEP, the I2A, I2W, and the targeting of the youth homelessness grant to ensure our young people who are in particularly vulnerable sets of circumstances, and having used our early intervention toolkit, that they may be at risk of homelessness, that we target them effectively. And our NEETs data is captured in an annual snapshot that's taken in partnership with Careers Wales, that is looked at by Welsh Government. So we've got those kind of key indicators that we keep an eye on. We've in recent years looked at how our youth services can evolve. We've had an eye on the changes in terms of the curriculum for Wales and the Successful Futures, as led by Professor Thomason for schools. And I think the key sort of components to our work is to ensure that our young people receive really bespoke services from us, particularly when we're focusing around the EOTUS agenda and vulnerable young people in the PRU. Absolutely essential, really, that we don't try and present them with a one-size-fits-all, that we put together provisions that really are specific to their needs, given it can be in many cases incredibly challenging to engage some of these young people who, for whatever reason, are from very vulnerable groups. We just scrolling down. We've looked to rebuild the service as a consequence of the reshape, and obviously there's been a change of direction from Families First. We are concerned, obviously, about the engagement with young people dropping off as a consequence of COVID. So we look to be really flexible in terms of engaging with young people online, and looking to engage as within obviously the given Welsh Government parameters around COVID, in circumstances such as outside type provision, and engaging with young socially distanced as well, to ensure that they're receiving the appropriate wellbeing support. And where it's required, we've linked in with families to deliver school meals and also wellbeing packages, particularly in the summer months, for some of our young people around personal hygiene, and providing advice and guidance around where they can receive the sort of key support. The Universal Service continues to offer a variety of provisions: Duke of Edinburgh, Local Democracy Week, and consultations over community events. And the Youth Service the Universal Service, as part of the Youth Service, is absolutely critical, really, to ensuring that we obtain high levels of pupil voice. And our Youth Service has been really creative in terms of its ability to engage with young people via Zoom and WhatsApp, and via web-based resources as well. It continues to work along in terms of participation with groups such as Penarth Youth Action, Llantyth Youth Council, and the Vale Youth Cabinet, supporting to ensure young people have a voice. And earlier on in the pandemic, it was great that the Universal Service were able to broker a discussion between members of this forum and the young people themselves, so they could ask those sorts of key questions directly around issues that concern them, particularly pertaining to the pandemic. Looking further down, then we've got student ambassador schemes, engaging with the Children's Commissioner for Wales. and a wide range of participation projects, as I mentioned. The youth cabinet question and answer session that I alluded to earlier was particularly successful, and our young people were really positive about that opportunity to engage. The reshape was incredibly positive for the youth services. Has allowed us to work in a far more flexible manner, and again referencing some of the stuff I said earlier about free school meals and the vulnerability check-ins was so key for us. We know, and the Inspectorate Estyn and Welsh Government have been really keen for local authorities to engage with their most vulnerable learners, and the youth service and the targeted service on this side of things has ensured that the most vulnerable young people have had those vital check-ins, particularly during the period of time where there was hub operation in place and schools were effectively closed. So it's worth highlighting that as a particular area where the change and the flexibility in the youth service delivery has meant that our young people have had that crucial engagement. We were also involved in the holiday enrichment programme. It's been very high profile in the media recently across the UK, with the footballer Marcus Rashford highlighting quite rightly the concerns around young people being engaged with over the holiday period, holiday hunger. Obviously is a great concern. So the youth service have been front and centre in terms of delivering activities over those summer months and ensuring our young people who are potentially vulnerable to becoming disengaged and hungry over the summer of access to the resource, the key resource that's required. We've also had a great initiative running there, Gloves in the Bin, Knives in the Gym, which is a boxing-based activity which encourages young people to come in, and if there are concerns around weaponry, that they're able to access support and encouragement to obviously not engage, not use weaponry as a way of resolving tensions in the community, but to approach things in a more positive manner. The youth wellbeing team is obviously looking to mentor young people, particularly those who have ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and there's some significant numbers there where young people have come in for mentoring sessions. We've got a lot of young people who are engaging via EOTUS, education other than at school channels, and the wellbeing team are supporting them either via phone or digital platforms to ensure that that service is maintained. So absolutely crucial, really, again, that our young people who are vulnerable get that access to the key support there. I2A, coming back to that, you can see the numbers are significant, 264% above profile for the project, which is obviously some achievement. We've got 72% of qualifications towards target there. And also in terms of our risk of becoming NEET, 92% of our young people engage into target and accessing certificates for qualification. So again, that will increase as we're able to engage post the lockdown. Newport is the main host and the main beneficiary for I2A, I2W. They lead the project, and they're very much content with our progress. I2W is 29% above the profile, currently about 155% in terms of education and training outcomes, 327 over qualification outcomes. The employment outcomes are 176. So as I said earlier, I2W performance is significantly above our projections at the beginning of the project, and significantly overachieved in terms of comparison with the other partners. So it's a real good news story for the Vale, and one we can't overstate the importance of. Looking at the needs agenda, our needs figures, particularly for 2017-2018, were very, very low, only 0.5% in 2018. And a lot of the good news around the needs agenda is as a consequence of the hard work of the youth service, doing the kind of door-knocking exercises, engaging with those young people and persevering even when initial engagements are really tricky, and the positive work of I2A, I2W. It is really about the youth service just continuing to persevere and push on even when young people are a little bit reluctant to engage. We focus in terms of our reduction of homelessness in our partnership with Lamai, who are another recipients of the I2W project. We focus heavily in this area with wellbeing parcels, food parcels, uniform support, particularly over the period of the pandemic. The partnership with Lamai is absolutely crucial in terms of that. We continue to operate the YEP program out of Barrier YMCA, which is great because it's central to the community, and many of our young people live in and around the facility, so it's easy for them to access. And the partnership there with the PRU again is absolutely crucial. The nurture support for some of the most vulnerable young people via YEP at the YMCA is a critical part of the youth service delivery. Reducing the percentage of young people becoming NEET obviously is key, and we've got a constant eye on the national and local indicators because Welsh governments continue to monitor us as a local authority in this respect, so our KPIs are crucial there. We're looking constantly at different learning pathways, bespoke educational provisions, engaging with different providers via our tendering processes and via direct awards. We've got some fantastic partnerships set up with the likes of Let Me Play, also the Grow project operating out of Amelia Trust, and we're setting up new arrangements with local businesses such as the Dojo services, focusing on engaging young people through martial arts and Tai Chi and wellbeing interventions. So we've got a real variety in terms of the suite of arrangements and agreements that we can offer young people, and we've highlighted those via a brochure to schools so they can engage directly too. We've got our Welsh Government's Youth Support Grant that we've drawn down at 413752, and we're mindful that the European Social Fund, as I said earlier, will end in December 22. So we're looking at ways we can sustain this vital work around I2A, I2W in the longer term, because the significant gains we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to lose. We're looking at the Shared Prosperity Grant and developing ways we can exit from the ESF. The Vale of Glamorgan Youth Service continues to use the One Management System, which is really useful, and we share our information with our equalities teams. We've seen the needs for an LGBTQ plus provision as part of our reshape, and we're looking to develop this over time as well. I'll stop sharing. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of the report.
Thank you, Martin, for that very in-depth guide through the report there. Does anyone have any questions for Martin? I know there's been a few questions already on the chat. Seems all very quiet here. Hi there, Morwen. I can see your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to make a brief comment, really, to endorse what Martin has said. You know, the youth service really is fantastic, and I think he's evidenced lots of the impact that they have on our young people. And what we've heard today, actually, is that 2 members of the youth team have been shortlisted as finalists for Youth Worker of the Year in the National Professional Teaching Awards across Wales. So there's only 3 shortlisted in that category across the whole of Wales, and 2 of them are ours in the Vale. So, you know, that's a testament to their excellent work.
Thank you. Catherine?
Thank you. I mean, yes, really just to back up what Maureen's just said, congratulations to those 2 youth workers. That's amazing. Really, just see what happens now. But yeah, the team have worked so hard, particularly over the pandemic period, because it's been so difficult for them to try and engage people at this moment in time, because the young people they have suffered quite a bit through the pandemic generally in a different way to all the adults. But they have been working so hard, going and like seeing people to make sure that they're okay and providing as much support as possible. So thank you to them for making a difference to so many people.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment? Okay, so the recommendations, there are 2. So we've considered the progress made. And the second one is that we receive a further progress report in 12 months. Are we happy to note the report and have a report in 12 months? Can we have a proposer?
I'd like to propose that, please.
Okay, thank you. And
Second.
a seconder? Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, so we had Sandra and Neil. Okay.
Actually, it was Rhiannon.
Oh, sorry, Rhiannon. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, all. Thank you, Martin. That was really good. Thank you for your help.
Pleasure,
Okay,
Chair.
and now, excellent. Thank you very much. And now we move on to agenda item 7, which is support for young carers in the Vale of Glamorgan. And I believe Martine, hi there.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me? That's fine. Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Hi there.
I'm very impressed that I've got my mic working. Well, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all this evening. And I'm here to just provide an update on how schools are supporting our young carers in the Vale. Now, I wanted just to be very clear that the secondary schools have got a formal and informal number of young carers which they've shared with us, and we've refreshed those numbers in September because we're very mindful that the schools were doing check-ins for their young carers throughout the lockdown period, and we're working on gathering those numbers in our primary schools. And what we've been working with the Young Carers Trust to identify, to work together to identify their numbers of young carers. And what they've identified is that they have 130 young carers and 10 young carers. So 130 are in the secondary schools and 10 are in the primary schools. And these are what we would class as formal young carers. So they've undergone an assessment to be a young carer, and those young people and children, they would have had parental consent to be young carers. And what we're understanding more and more is that schools are providing support for young carers who are identified formally, and they've got significant numbers of young carers who are informal young carers who don't have essentially parents that want them to be identified as young carers. So that's, for me, the biggest learning that we've had since I last spoke to you all. And in terms of numbers of young carers, at the moment, we're revisiting our data collection that we hold as a local authority, because we found that we had a discrepancy in how we're collecting our data. So we are working with Young Carers Trust and social services to make sure our data is cleaner. So that involves making sure that we've got a data disclosure agreement, that we will work with legal to make sure that we've got all the processes in place so we can share the information securely to support the young carers. But the schools have been very clear that the support they give to young carers is a significant level if they're formal and informal. So I know that was a discussion point last time we met, Chair. So I didn't come up for breath at all, did I?
Thank you, Martine. Would anyone like to ask any questions? Councillor Thomas.
Sorry, it's pretty inevitable. Yeah, thanks for that, Martine. I was just wondering, are all schools now engaged with this in a positively active way, or are some still, I was aware that not too long ago, some schools were not engaging and others were paying lip service without really doing much in terms of looking for and supporting young carers. I mean, has the situation changed? I mean, it's obviously difficult with COVID and all the rest of it, the schools being closed, but is that trend moving in the right direction, and how far has it gone, please?
Thank you. Well, I'd say we're definitely moving in the right direction, and it was actually really interesting in lockdown that the schools were very much aware of who they were, and they were going the extra mile. So, for example, doing additional door knocks, doing additional packages, and making sure, for example, some of the older children who were young carers, the schools made sure that they had access to the hubs, whereas normally they may not be seen as children that be on top of the list. But the secondary school said to give them a break from caring from their younger siblings, they would offer them a place in the hub provision. So schools are being very creative, and I just thought they offered support that was appropriate to the needs of the young carer. So with regards to the direction of travel in the secondary schools, I'm very confident, and we have lots of evidence to say what they're doing for both sets of carers. And in the primary schools, what we are having anecdotally is they are offering support, but again, it's differentiated because so many of the young carers that the primary schools have identified are informal carers, and the parents aren't willing to give permission for children to be classed as young carers.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what's been said highlights always my concern here is that, you know, the numbers are well below, or the official numbers, we put it that way, are well below what the actuality is. Is there an estimate of how many young carers there actually are which are not approved by their parents?
Well, for example, we had one of our secondary schools, young carers had 10 children identified as official young carers, and the school had 20 unofficial carers, and they had 5 official ones. So with regards to numbers, and we're working on our data team to work with Welsh Government, because we wanted the dialogue to be about having it as part of the plastic return, so that we could really raise the profile with schools, and also as well with families, to explain the benefits it would have for the child and as a family to be identified as a young carer. And this afternoon we met with schools to talk about using the ID card, and again we talked about if we can promote it with families about the benefits, then hopefully the stigma which often puts families off from declaring their children as young carers, hopefully we can overcome that. So we're trying to work in different ways to make sure that we've got a truer number, because the number that we've got recorded and the actual number, we know there's a massive discrepancy.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions from the panel? Okay, I can't see anyone. Okay, so we have one recommendation on this agenda item, that the members note the support provided by the local authority in schools for young carers. Would anyone like to be the proposer?
Move that we accept the recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Jane Norman, and a seconder?
No, that was Rhiannon Birch again.
Okay, Jane, we'll have you as second. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, we can move now on to agenda item 8, which is the proposal to establish a special resource base at Whitmore High School from September 2021.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just give a quick overview before we go into the video. This report's very similar to the report that came last time for the Centre for Learning and Wellbeing, in that it's to ensure that Scrutiny Committee can feed into the consultation process on the school organisation proposal. The minutes for the meeting will be attached to the consultation report that's considered by Cabinet when the consultation is complete. So the proposal is to the proposal is part of our additional learning needs strategy. So we discussed that at the last meeting, and there were 3 key elements to that strategy. That's to establish the Centre for Learning and Wellbeing, which will replace the DITE, the Council's PRU. It's to establish specialist resource bases in mainstream schools to ensure that learners can access mainstream education, and it's also to increase the capacity of Ysbyderi, the Council Special School, to meet future demand. It is an area with considerable growing demand over recent years, and that is something that all local authorities are finding. So the specific proposal in this one is to establish a specialist resource base at Whitmore High School from September 2021. The resource base would provide support for up to 20 pupils with autism. The proposal ensures that the main purpose of the proposal is to ensure that pupils can access mainstream education and have that opportunity. So it's targeted at those pupils who perhaps their needs wouldn't require a placement at Ysgol-y-Deri. However, they do need additional support within a mainstream secondary environment to access that the mainstream education. It's something that some pupils are with autism are fine through primary phase, where it's small, they're in one class, but then the secondary can be quite a big jump when you're much larger environments with moving classes and a lot of different components. So the reason is that the purpose of it is to make sure that we have provision for those pupils who otherwise wouldn't have support or provision available to them, but also to relieve pressure from Ysgol-y-Deri so that there is an alternative for those pupils that our needs aren't so great that they require that placement at Ysgol-y-Deri. So the consultation launched on the 5th of October and it's due to end on the 20th of November. The consultations conducted through the consultation document, which was issued in accordance with the School Organisation Code. The management of the facility would be by Whitmore High School, the governing body and leadership of the school. That's slightly different from the previous proposal that came last time, which was the specialist resource base at Gladstone Primary School, and the management of that would fall under Ysgol-y-Deri. This one is different approach because it's a very different type of base. So the base at Gladstone was for 10 pupils who would spend all of their time within that base. They wouldn't access mainstream education within Gladstone Primary School, so it was felt that it was more appropriate for Ysgol-y-Deri to have that skills and knowledge to run that base. Whereas this one, those pupils would use the base for support and pre-teaching of lessons and a safe space to go if they needed to, but the majority of their time would be in mainstream education lessons. We're building the new £30 million school for Whitmore High School. We requested additional money from Welsh Government when we started that, when we set up that proposal, specifically for additional learning needs. So the area within the school to house this resource base has already been funded through the 21st Century Schools programme, and we have an identified area on the ground floor. So all we need to do is, if this proposal is approved and goes ahead, we just need to work with the school to design the interior layout of that area. So far, we haven't had a considerable response to this proposal. As of Monday, we were at 11 responses. All 11 of those were in favour of the proposal. Therefore, we haven't had any negative issues or any issues raised to let you know about or to provide a response to. I did meet with the governing body of Whitmore High School on Tuesday evening, and they were very supportive of the proposal, and they have now submitted a formal response stating that they're in favour of the proposal as well, so that will also be fed back as part of the report. Estin also submitted their formal response this week, and they noted that the proposal would at least maintain standards within the school, and there were no issues raised as part of that response. So I'm not sure whether David wants to say anything or whether we're going straight to the video.
Yeah, if I can just say thank you, Matt. Is it okay, Chair, if I just say something quickly? Yeah,
fire away.
So yeah, what we're hoping to do by showing you the video is to give you a better understanding of the nature of the young people that we're looking to support within this base. As you'll be aware, the autistic spectrum is very large. I hope you can still see me. I've been sitting still here and my lights have gone out. Yeah, so it's a very wide range, the autistic spectrum. So, for example, the verbal communication difficulties are an element of the autistic spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, we have very complex cases where young people are non-verbal that is that, you know, they don't speak at all. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have young people who have very, very good language skills, but have limited social understanding of language. So they find sort of the nuances of language difficult, and therefore sort of, you know, many of the rules in our world are unwritten rules that we come to understand, and many of these young people find that very, very difficult. So rather than me trying to explain all the different facets of autism to you, I thought this film, which utilises the words of young people, would help that, you know, do that much more effectively. But I just wanted to point out that these are the young people that we feel are on the less complex end of the spectrum, and therefore, with support, could manage in a mainstream school and could flourish in a mainstream school. Whereas Ysgol y Deri would be catering for the needs of the more complex end of the spectrum, if that makes sense. So if we go into the film, if Catherine could put that on, more than happy. I'm sure Matt or myself will answer any questions after we watch the film. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to play the video. If you have any problems viewing it, please indicate that in the chat function. And if you're having slow internet, it might help you if you turn your camera off, and that might improve the quality. So just let us know if you're having issues.
Autism is quite difficult to define, but for me, being autistic, the biggest aspect of that is that I think in different ways to other people, and I see the world in a different way to other people as well.
So autism is a different way of processing information. My brain processes things differently to other people. It's a bit like having a different operating system in a computer. It processes social information differently, it communicates differently, my natural methods of communication are different. It even comes up with ideas differently to other people. It's not better or worse than a non-autistic brain, it's just different.
Autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition. It occurs in 1 out of 100 people, and males are far more likely than females to receive a diagnosis. Autistic people get their diagnosis due to difficulties in 2 areas: social communication difficulties and repetitive patterns of thought and behaviour. However, if you talk to autistic people themselves about the way they feel, they are far more likely to describe their sensory experiences.
Interacting with people or sort of communicating with people can be especially difficult, as we may not see like a social cue or sign that someone else might see.
For me, social communication and interaction are 2 things that I've always found somewhat difficult. For example, I've always struggled with eye contact. So when I'm looking, I can't look at someone, they're speaking to me, and vice versa. Also, I find it difficult to understand social rules that haven't necessarily been written down, so they're kind of you're expected to just know about them.
Autism is a spectrum, and that means that social communication difficulties can be very varied. So at one end of the spectrum, you may have a person who has no language and who has difficulty with non-verbal aspects of communication. And on the other hand, you may have someone who is very skilled in their use of language, but has difficulty with the pragmatic, the social aspects of language, such as use of jokes and metaphor and so on, and they may have a very literal understanding of language.
So social communication for autistic people, their natural response is different to non-autistics. They tend to prefer sharing information rather than doing the small talk. A friend of mine came up with a really good analogy for small talk to explain why it's so hard for autistic people. If you imagine a world where everyone loves maths except you, if you're going through your day-to-day life and everyone's asking you maths questions all the time and you can't work out the right answers, that's going to feel really difficult for you and really awkward. And it also explains why one-to-one conversations for autistic people can be a lot more effective and easily understandable. If you imagine you've got 3 different people asking you maths questions at the same time, you're not going to be able to understand any of those and answer them sensibly. So it's much better to be in a one-to-one situation for autistic people, and also to talk about their special interests and the things and share information rather than do that small talk that's so difficult.
Whilst I suppose my parents can vouch for the fact that I have a good sense of humour, I'm often the last person to get if someone's being sarcastic, or the last person to get a joke.
Autistic people sometimes have difficulty with imagination and difficulty predicting what's happening next in their lives. So having patterns and routines helps them to predict what's happening next.
So patterns and routines are really important for lots of reasons, partly because they're soothing and we find them comforting to stay with the things that we know. But one of the reasons that I use patterns and routines is because my executive function is so poor, so my management of what I'm doing is so poor. If I get up in the morning and I think, what am I going to do today? My internal manager gives me all these options and I don't know what to choose from. Therefore, if I have a routine instead, it means I can shut that off and I can rely on my pattern thinking instead. So instead of getting up and going, do I brush my teeth, do I have my coffee, do I eat something? I have a routine. If I get up and I have coffee, I brush my teeth, I wash, I get dressed, I go down. I have a really strict routine of everything I do. But that can mean if I don't have my coffee in the morning, it can throw everything off and I don't know where to go. So routines can be really good for building in constructive structure to my life.
Autism is often associated with anxiety, and again, having patterns and routines helps to control this anxiety.
Patterns and routines have always been incredibly important to me. In particular, I like having a timetable to follow, and when this is changed at the last minute or unexpectedly, for example, with my university timetable, that can throw me off course, and that can completely mess up my whole day, really.
Patterns and routines are important to me because they help me sort of make a plan for the day. So if I'm planning on, like, if I've got like a day of like college or something, then I can actually pick at specific points and sort of plan ahead. So I can, in the moment, I can actually be a lot more at ease and like enjoy myself a bit more.
I like being on time for things, and I like even being early for things, but when somebody else is too early or too late for something, that can also throw me off course.
An autistic person's sensory experiences can be more or less intense than a neurotypical person. So they may hear noises really loudly, or they may not hear that noise at all. Sometimes they say that noises hurt their ears.
So the sensory world for an autistic person can be very different, again, to a non-autistic person's. We tend to feel things either very, very strongly or much less. And that can vary day to day as well. So for example, as a child, I would quite happily go outside in the snow in a t-shirt. I have real problems with sound, with certain everyday sounds like pound coins clinking or cutlery on plates. Those sounds are incredibly painful for me. But at the same time, I get a lot of sensory pleasure from what my body can give me. Everything is heightened, so I can use pleasant sensory input through stimming and movement to overcome that unpleasant sensory information, to keep on top of it and to help keep me balanced.
I also find things like bright lights quite disorientating, as for me, I'm quite photophobic, so bright lights are always 10 times brighter to me. And also loud noises, but I'm okay with loud noises on my own terms. I quite like listening to loud music, but if it's an unexpected loud noise, such as the Hoover randomly turning on, then that can be quite difficult for me.
What's different about an autistic person's sensory experience is that we sort of feel things a bit differently. So like, if we hear a loud noise, that might make us quite uneasy, while it might not affect another person, or sort of like certain like feelings or tastes or whatever, that can sort of really affect us in a positive and negative way a lot more than it would a typical person.
Think about meltdowns. Imagine yourself in a room full of people with lots of noise, bright lights, funny smells, lots of sounds. That may be the time when an autistic person experiences a meltdown. A meltdown is not a tantrum. A meltdown is what happens to an autistic person when they experience sensory overload.
I suppose the best analogy I can think of for sensory overload would be akin to a bottle of fizzy pop. So for example, if there's a loud noise, then you shake the bottle of pop once, and if there's a bright light that's bothering me, then you'd shake the bottle twice. And if I'm also wearing clothing that's particularly uncomfortable, I shake it 3 times, and I suppose over time more and more things build up, and eventually the lid comes off and the whole thing just kind of explodes.
The most important thing I've learnt about autism is the equation autism plus environment equals outcome. So when there's a problem for autistic people, you always want to look at the environment and see what it is that's triggering that. Autism on its own is not the issue. The difference between a happy autistic person and an unhappy autistic person can always be found in the environment, whether it's sensory difficulties or unexpected change. You always want to look at the environment to see where the problem lies.
My greatest issues don't really stem from the fact that I have some difficulties with social communication or that I have sensory issues. For me, my greatest issue is that more often than not, people tend not to be very understanding of what it is like to be autistic. If people were more understanding of autistic people, the way we see things, the way that we learn, then the world would be a far better place, not just for autistic people, but for everyone, because understanding is so important.
Okay, thank you for watching that. I think the key message there, gives an all insight into life of young people with autism, but the key factor there is about the environment. So this is absolutely what this proposal is about. It's about creating an environment which is autism friendly, which can mean that these young people can access the education of their peers. As you could hear from those young people, very articulate, able young people, but very often because the environment is wrong, then they are unable to access that environment. And in schools, that means access learning. So it's a huge step forward for us, I think, in this proposal and this provision, so to enable these young people to access the education that they deserve and to feel safe in that environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you for showing that short video. Councillor Burnett, I believe you'd like to.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. I think that credit has to go to David mainly, but also the rest of the team for championing this and the ambition that we have that every child in the Vale has educational settings appropriate to their needs, and that's why the resource base at Gladstone Primary was brought to you. It's why there'll be an extension of Ysgolderry brought to you. It's why this has now come to you. And I think it's fair to say that in recent years, more and more has been learned about the entire spectrum in terms of autism. So the social disability side, rather than the necessarily more complex side, has been better understood, and it's led to a lot of adults being diagnosed now whose lives might have been very different if they'd been diagnosed and supported when they were younger. That's actually led to quite a high level of mental health issues. That it was, you know, in the film it was mentioned about high anxiety levels of people living in environments that are fairly alien to them without support, and the suicide rate of people on the autism spectrum is high. So what we are trying to achieve here is that right level of support to young people so they can continue in mainstream education, as you know they are very able to do, but that doesn't provide a hostile environment for them. We want them to have a supportive environment so that they can sort of dip out of mainstream education, get the support they need, and then go back in. So it's been brought to you today by the team, and I hope that the committee will support it.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Would anyone like to come in? Councillor Birch?
Thank you. Can I say how much I welcome this development? I think it's marvellous that we're recognising different aspects of the spectrum of mental health problems. I have a family member who is high functioning Asperger's, and we have already seen that she has become distressed in school, that she, because of her, she doesn't live in this education authority, I hasten to add, but she is used in school because she is so well behaved as a control. She gets sat in the middle of a collection of naughty boys in order that her presence will pacify them and get them to get on with work, which seems terribly unfair. We've got over largely the teasing that she went through when she was went into high school, but we have seen that she has suffered from tremendous stress. There have been instances of self-harm, and I think anything that does that seeks to alleviate this for children has got to be applauded. I mean, it's particularly difficult because obviously I'm using the pronoun that she's a girl, and they are less likely to be diagnosed. And you know, I do welcome this. I think it's tremendous that we've been able to look outside the kind of mainstream of other types of children and to look at this smaller group and be able to address their needs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Would anyone else like to come in? Any questions, comments? Okay. So I understand there's two recommendations on this. One is that we note the consultation document and the relevant appendices on the proposal, and then we endorse the proposal and provide any feedback to be considered by Cabinet as part of the consultation report. So do we have anything we want to add to that?
Wholeheartedly move the recommendations.
Absolutely,
Okay.
I'd like to second those.
Okay, excellent. I totally agree. So would we like a proposer?
I'm proposing that.
Okay.
Birch.
Thank you,
Seconded.
Councillor. And seconded by Councillor Thomas. Thank you very much. Okay, and we are on to the last agenda item for tonight's meeting, which is the summary of school inspection reports for spring term 2020.
Thank you very much,
Caris.
Chair. Thank you. I'll just take you briefly through the paper in terms of the inspection reports for spring term 2020. Just to let you know that it was only one school that was inspected during this period, and that was St Cyrus Comprehensive School. There was going to be another school in the Vale inspected during this period, but obviously then things changed quite significantly in March, and Eston suspended their inspection because of the pandemic. In terms of the inspection reports, as I know you're very much aware, Eston introduced a new inspection framework back in September 2017, and schools now are inspected once during a 7-year period. In terms of the focus and the areas in terms of the inspection, if you have a look at 2.9, you will see that there are 5 inspection areas: standards, well-being and attitudes to learning, teaching and learning experiences, care support and guidance, and leadership and management. And then you've got in 2.10 the judgments, because for each of those areas there will be a judgment, and you've got 4 options there, ranging from excellent, being very strong, sustained performance and practice, good, strong features, although minor aspects may require improvement, adequate and needs improvement, strengths outweigh weaknesses, but important aspects require improvement. And then the final category is unsatisfactory and needs urgent improvement. And that means that important weaknesses outweigh strengths. So those are the 4 judgment areas that Estyn use. And in terms of follow-up category, there are 3 follow-up categories in terms of Estyn review, significant improvement, and special measures. So as I mentioned, St Cyrus was the only school that was inspected during the spring term, and you've got the outcomes in terms of their inspection report in 2.13. You'll see that there were 3 adequate and needs improvement judgments for inspection area 1, 3 and 5, and there were 2 good outcomes for inspection area 2 and 4. In terms of Appendix B that you've got as part of the papers, you will also see the 4 recommendations that the school received. I'll just go through them briefly. It was to raise standards, including pupils' literacy and numeracy skills, to improve teaching and assessment, improve leadership at all levels, including the precision of self-evaluation and improvement planning, and to improve provision for and standards in Welsh. Because of the recommendations and because of the judgments made, in particular the 3 adequate and needs improvement judgment, the school was judged to be in requiring follow-up, and Estyn will be reviewing the school's progress. So they are in Estyn review follow-up category. In terms of any excellent practice, and sometimes Estyn does ask schools if they see a very good practice to write a case study. St Cyrus weren't invited to ask, to write a written case study there. Just to give you the context in terms of other schools that have been inspected since the start of this common inspection framework in September 2017, there hasn't been any schools identified as requiring significant improvement or special measures, but there are additional 3 other schools that have been identified as requiring Estyn review, and they are St Illtyd Primary, Llangan Primary, and a Daith Pupil Referral Unit. In terms of timeline, we were anticipating Estyn to revisit these schools in the summer term or this autumn term, but obviously due to the circumstances, Estyn have postponed review meetings currently. So you've got information in terms of, as well in Appendix C, an overall summary of the Estyn activity in the Vale of Glamorgan since 2017. But I would like to use this opportunity just to explain really the situation this year in terms of Estyn activity. It was planned to actually partially suspend inspections this year. I'm sure you might have been aware of that in discussions about the new curriculum, the curriculum for Wales that's been introduced in readiness for 2022. Estyn were planning to undertake engagement visits with all schools to discuss with them the readiness for the new curriculum in terms of what was working well and what any challenges and barriers schools are facing in relation to the curriculum for Wales. Now, obviously, due to the pandemic, that hasn't been possible. So during this period, Estyn have been undertaking engagement phone calls with schools, focusing primarily on two key areas, vulnerable learners and approaches to learning, particularly blended learning. So those are the two areas that Estyn have been focusing on, and they have called a number of schools in the Vale to ask their opinion and to discuss those areas with them. They are hoping to restart engagement visits and engagement phone calls in relation to the curriculum and in terms of the well-being of learners very soon, but we haven't really had at the moment had a definite date in relation to that. So I don't know if there's any questions that people have in relation to the report.
Thank you, Caris. Do we have any questions from the group here regarding the agenda item? Rhiannon, is that, or you just
yes,
moving the camera?
I was wondering, you know, just basically, since sires, I'm not going to say they don't deserve it. I mean, I know what the inspection process is like. I have been through myself 10 inspections, and I know the stress that they cause. I'm just concerned that they're, according to the inspectors, their standards have slipped, and I'm concerned about, you know, the implications for it, because they're now doing blended learning, so it makes it even more difficult to meet the criteria that Estyn have in place. And I wondered how much support we are able to offer them, and whether there are other schools that other staff that could be drafted in from, you know, around the Vale to offer them help in this circumstance.
Chair, is it okay if I respond to that question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. In terms of the support, there's actually quite a lot of support ongoing, and we're working alongside the school. In the first instance, we've got additional time for the improvement partner to work with the school, to support the school and to challenge the school in terms of their progress. We've also got key people from the strategic team in Central South Consortium supporting, particularly in relation to literacy, mathematics, in terms of digital support and Welsh. And as part of that support, for example, we are signposting them to other departments across the consortium to see best practice and to learn from that. We've also, for example, allocated some additional funding for the maths teacher to develop, the maths department, I should say, to develop their own resources, and that includes supply funding and supply time for them to visit other schools to see best practice as part of that. We're also trying to support them in terms of finding resources that would help them, particularly in relation to Welsh, and some funding there as well to develop the informal aspects of Welsh, because that was something that Estyn raised. And again, we're signposting other schools where we've got very strong practices in that area. So we're establishing and supporting the schools to make connections with that. We've also funded places to address some of the leadership aspects on the Senior Leaders Development Programme. So that's another avenue and source of funding and support for the school.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, what's interesting about that is it's really good that all of this support is being put in place, but it does make me feel that schools should be sharing all of this best practice all through their existence, not just waiting for an inspection to point out these shortcomings. That, obviously you have inspectors, not official Estyn inspectors, but the consortium itself has people who, go around to schools and look at various departments and so forth. And it would seem that we should be, nipping this in the bud before it gets to the point of an inspection, so that departments or even whole schools are able to access this support without the kind of shame and that a bad Estyn report can bring. Because I know that staff having been on the end of it myself, staff feel terrible after inspections. I mean, for a start, there's a complete letdown after the entire process has been gone through. But people who are criticised, or departments who are criticised, feel tremendous guilt and distress about that. So I just wonder why we haven't been able to identify these problems before they are brought, before Estin points them out to us, and whether it's possible for us to offer support in a more timely fashion before it, you know, becomes public through the Estin process.
We were aware of the challenges that Insiders were facing, and in terms of the categorisation report, if you go back to September 2019, the categorisation outcomes for St Cyrus changed from being a B yellow school to a C amber school, to enable them to access more support, because the change in colour would enable a school to receive more intensive support. So, and we have been working with the schools since then when we became aware of the challenges to support key departments within the school. I would also like to draw attention in a sense to the work in terms of CSCs, school improvement groups, and the support that schools, you know, sort of school to school support that is developing and has developed over a number of years now in terms of CSC, and the sharing good practice that's happening between schools across the region, you know, sort of to support schools to identify strengths, but also to develop any areas for improvement. So they're funded, and you know they've got small groups of about 10 to 15 schools working closely together on identified project that's common to all to improve standards as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Councillor Perks?
I wondered how this inspection and sort of the quality of teaching that they're talking about as being adequate and needing attention actually reflects on pupil performance as well. I mean, I know it's difficult this year to judge how pupil performance has related due to the GCSEs not actually taking place, but how would this actually reflect on pupil attainment and things like that as well?
There's actually quite a close correlation between the standards of teaching and standards in the inspection report. And if you read the inspection report, there's a lot of links happening in terms of standards. There's reference, for example, to areas for development in relation to pupils' literacy and numeracy skills in particular. There's also reference to pupils' Welsh language skills coming through in terms of the quality of standards, and they're also reflected in the section on quality of teaching and curriculum experiences. So there's actually a very, very close correlation between the findings in terms of teaching and the impact that does have on standards in the inspection report.
Oh, thank you. And it's good to know that they will be getting extra support from various other areas as well. So hopefully, you know, in turn it around and ensure that pupils can sort of attain, you know, what they're capable of.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've had a little bit of buffering over the last few minutes that wasn't there before. So, but have we looked at the fact that the school has, well, it's lost a head and has a temporary head, and what impact that's had on the leadership, because that seems to be a significant aspect of the report as well. I mean, maybe you've already addressed this, and I missed it, but if you could do it again, please.
In terms of leadership, obviously when the school was inspected in January, and you'll see in the report, it does say that there was an acting sort of head in place, and that the 3 members of the leadership team were in a sense, you know, on a temporary positions. For your information, at the end of the last half term, the school appointed head teacher, Peter Lewis, who was previously the acting head teacher at the school. So the school now has a permanent head teacher in place. And there are plans to appoint a deputy for September 2021.
Okay.
It's going to be a year before a deputy is appointed. Hell's bells.
Paula,
yeah, I just wanted to respond to the question about the change in leadership. I think had the previous head still been there, the inspection outcome would have been the same. I don't think it was as a result of there being an acting head and that change in leadership. We were picking these issues up at the school under the previous head. And, you know, as with all of these things, there has to be a willingness for the school to work with us and to recognise and acknowledge its position too. And I think that was difficult under the previous head. We're hopeful that we can build a more positive relationship with the school now. And as Caris has said, we are putting in substantial support. I would share your concern about the plans around the deputy, and that has been questioned. But the school is in has a projected budget deficit and believes that it can address that by delaying the appointment. There is an acting deputy in place who is the same acting deputy as was there during the inspection.
okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to come in? Seems all quiet here. The only thing I'd like to say, I know this is a new inspection framework, so I've very little knowledge of what went before it, but it would be useful to ensure the knowledge sharing comes across many of the schools. Yeah, I can see some of the other schools are adequate. To be interesting to see how they improve and maybe share those best practices. But yeah, so reiterate really what Caris has been saying along those lines. Okay, so we have one recommendation, I believe, on this, which is to note the inspection judgments what the school inspected during the spring term. Are we happy just to note it, or would we like to add anything to it? Okay, can we have a proposer, please?
Right, can I propose the recommendation? And because we'll be having a follow-up within the next few months anyway, won't we?
Yeah. Okay. And then seconder. Morwen, I think you got hand up, sorry.
Sorry, yes, it wasn't a second.
Right,
It was
go
just
on.
a comment on Councillor Birch that we don't know when we'll have that follow-up report yet from Eston. They haven't said when they'll be visiting.
Okay, so we got a proposer, Rhiannon, and Councillor Jane Norman, are you seconding? Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure if Councillor
Okay.
Birch is actually, if her connection's still with us. I was under the impression she wanted to propose something, or is she still with us?
She
Okay,
looks
well, on
frozen
that.
again. She proposed the recommendation.
Okay,
Yes,
lovely.
I
Just
believe.
wanted to double check. That's fine.
Okay.
Can you hear
Fabulous.
me? Well,
Yes.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh.
We were just saying, Rhiannon, that you're proposing to note the report. And Councillor Jane Norman's going to second. So we're happy. Okay. And then we got any items which the chairman has decided are urgent. I have nothing, and that's the same for part 2, number 11. So there we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and have a good evening.
Good night, all. Good night.
Thank you all.
Getting used to the flutter now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.